chose the most complicated title to present, so I'm also probably going to be struggling too. I am so excited to be here on behalf of one of the sponsors of this event, Onfido. And at Onfido, I am VP of Engineering and Technical Program Management. Of course, I'm going to introduce myself properly and explain what that even means and why I'm so passionate and excited to talk to you about being a master of none. It's a bit weird, right? And so we'll get into that. But really, it's really about multipotentialites and how they are set up to solve technological problems when there's a high degree of uncertainty. And they do that by pulling from a range of experiences and expertises, and how they work with both leaders, specialists, and generalists together, especially when they're growing in their leadership career. So let's get into it. I'm going to sit down and get comfortable. Is that OK? Yeah? OK. So I would actually like to know if other people are also multipotentialites, or maybe you know someone who is. So we'll get into how that's defined. I quote the book Range a lot in this talk, and it's a really good reference and book on this topic in general. So what I do today, well, as I said, I work for the company Onfido. And what does Onfido do? Onfido is a digital identity verification platform. And what we do is make sure people are who they say they are when they're transacting and interacting over the internet. We do that by taking a selfie of your facial biometrics, so you might be taking a picture or a video, and an image of your government-issued ID or video of your government-issued ID, like your passport or your driver's license. We then use AI, machine learning, technology, artificial intelligence to make sure you are really a human. And that human, the document belongs to you, and it's not fraudulent, and you're safe to operate. And that gives our clients insight that they can make a decision to let you into their products and services. So you may have used our technology when you signed up for banking applications like Barclays, Revolut, or Monzo. And there, I lead the foundation engineering group and the technical program management function. It's about 55 or so individuals across multiple different engineering, technology backgrounds. So it's teams like DevOps and SRE. They are the teams that really build and scale our cloud infrastructure. The test teams who make sure that we deliver the highest quality products and ship that safely to our customers. Software engineering teams, back-end, front-end, full stack. Some who look after our privacy, data privacy, make sure we are really being respectful and safeguarding the data that we hold. We hold some of the most sensitive data you can imagine, your face and your ID documents. We also have teams that look after our core services. We have one of the leads in my group here today. You can speak to him later, Abu Samra, who leads our core services teams, but also our billing and commercial tooling infrastructure. And Abu Samra is a G. He's taken on more responsibility. So over the next few months, we'll be also looking at digital identity. So more and more governments are going to start producing documents, not in physical form, but actually like a digital version of your driver's license. And we need to make sure we keep up with that as well. But I also wear other hats. So I'm a volunteer at a secondary school in North London called Copthall Girls, where I sit on the board of the school as a governor. We need more black people as school governors. So if you're interested in becoming one, please come and see me after, and I can tell you about that process. I'm also an advisor at an early-stage startup called CloudFO, which is software for business owners to help them not run out of cash, and that's really exciting too. My career is quite diverse. So I studied materials science and engineering at the University of Manchester. Whilst I was there, I took a year out to work at the Ministry of Defence, and then worked for a global manufacturing company, which allowed me to travel around the world. Then to an e-commerce business where I worked on the web applications, but also the technology that gets your orders to your front door. And now here at Onfido. Other facts about me. So I was born and raised in London. I know that's quite rare these days. But my family background comes from like several different countries in the Caribbean and Tanzania. I had two parents who were teachers, and so they signed me up to every single extracurricular activity possible. I did everything from maths clubs in the summer, yes, to carnival costume making and dance classes. They were also foster carers, so I often had to welcome pretty much strangers into my home and share my parents with them. And so it gave me exposure to diverse cultures, experiences. We traveled as a family. And it meant that, by the time I got to A-levels, I was super clear on what I wanted to do, as you can see from my choices. I chose English, physics, chemistry, and fashion. Very, very clear. But really, I just chose what I was passionate about. And today, my passions are still just as varied. Yes, I love tech, but I also love dancing, reading, traveling, and I love food. So let's get into it. What is a multi-potentialite? And why am I so okay with being called a master of none? Well, I was talking about this week, and actually, it's really misused and misquoted all the time. The full quote is that sometimes, because it's all about equity and equality, right? Sometimes a master of none is better than a master of one. And that quote was by Robert Greene describing William Shakespeare, someone we clearly revere today because we still teach his plays a millennia later. And I first came across the word multi-potentialite when I was listening to Emily Wapnick's TED Talk. And Emily talks about this term. She actually coins this term. And it's basically someone who doesn't just have one true calling, they actually have multiple. They explore different passions, sometimes at the same time, sometimes sequentially. I'm a bit more of the simultaneous type. And she talks about the fact that even as children, we're often asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? You have to choose, you have to fit into a box. But oftentimes that feeling and that question that we get, even as adults, can kind of stir up uncertainty, imposter syndrome, or feeling not worthy. And it's actually the book, The Range, that talks about the fact that if you actually expose your children to multiple instruments, multiple subjects, and sports, those children, and there's a lot of evidence that shows this, that those children end up outperforming their peers once they get older, even if they then choose to specialize. So thank you, Mum and Dad, for all of that extracurricular activity. Emily talks about 3 characteristics or attributes of a multipotentialite: idea synthesizing, adaptability, and rapid learning. And these are the themes that we're going to explore. I mentioned I work for a company that uses artificial intelligence, or AI, and machine learning. And companies like Confido, we do things like OCR to extract the values from a document automatically. Or computer vision, our colleague Ananya here, she can tell you all about that. She works in research and looking at things that make us detect the texture of the skin to make sure you're not wearing a mask, for example. So we have lots of technology that helps us explore whether you are a real person. And many companies like Confido are making leaps and bounds in machine learning and artificial intelligence. But I'm going to tell you a little secret. Most of it is still quite narrow. So the AI we interact with today can do one thing really well. What the reality is, life is that the data they see is often not as similar to the data it was trained on. And we know that life gets messy, life gets overlapping, it's complex. So people, us, and technologists, and also the technology we build, needs to be able to deal with that complexity. So we need to be able to work in a wicked world. There are 3 kind of ways that we can look at this: through mindset, through system thinking, and through measurement. So let's start with mindset. I am a multi-potentialite. I'm always trying something new. I love trying something new, right? But there is still that fear every time, oh, I don't know how to do this. And let me just break it to you. If you're working in an innovative space and you're doing something that you've not done before, or even your industry altogether hasn't done before, it's going to be uncertain. Otherwise, why would you be doing it? So we know that actually as you research, you go through the process, you actually get more confident, you get more evidence, you get more learnings, and your uncertainty decreases over time. But life does not happen in smooth lines. And so companies like Confido use agile methodologies, lean techniques to iterate, experiment, and get feedback faster. And that's that first characteristic, rapid learning. Now let's invert that cone of uncertainty, and that's your approach to planning. You should only be planning in detail as far as you can see, otherwise known as the planning horizon. As a leader, though, you should be operating at the end of that horizon, showing your teams the vision, the direction, and the strategy. And then leave your teams to autonomously plan their day-to-day. But you collaborate together in the middle through roadmaps, through OKRs, which are objectives and key results, and the strategy that you're going to take. Now we're going to flip this one more time, 90 degrees, and that's your approach to risk management. Yes, things happen. And a risk is just an uncertain event that, should it occur, it will have some effect on the attainment of your goals. But that can be positive as well as negative. And do you know what? Most things fall in the middle. So using this framework can help you overcome that uncertainty and that feeling of imposter syndrome sometimes when you're starting something new. Now, I said the next thing was measurement. Measurement, a lot of people talk about data and metrics, but don't realize that it's actually really, really layered. So on this side, you have to think about business goals. I don't care if you run your own company or you work for an organization. Every company has an ultimate goal. I'm not going to go into this to too much detail because I do have a post on Medium, but let's just step through it, right? So a business goal could be, for a company, could be to increase revenue. It could be to grow the number of users. And at some phases of a company, it could be to reduce cost. Whatever it is, you should know what your business is driving for, and as a leader, you should be repeating that constantly to your teams. The next goal is, let's take an example. You work for an e-commerce site. You can have a goal as a team who might be responsible for the checkout experience to improve conversion rate. Conversion rate just means how many people have checked out successfully and bought something from your site. So you might be like, yeah, I'm going to change the button, I'm going to make it easier. But you also need to think about secondary metrics like, okay, well, how much are they spending? Has anyone tried the buy now button on Amazon? Sometimes it's actually quite quick that actually you don't scroll anymore. You just buy it now and you're gone. So yeah, it can have a different impact. And thinking of impact, you can also have negative impacts. So let's say you decide you're going to target Gen Z and you're going to grow your conversion rate by changing the experience. But then all of a sudden you notice the revenue's going down. Revenue is a lagging metric. So if you actually have looked at your bounce rate, you might have seen that actually loads of people have been leaving your site because you turned off all the boomers who usually buy your products. So it's really important to understand the layers of metrics within the companies that you're working with and the impact that you can have across them. The way you can de-risk going through that cone of uncertainty is experimentation. Many of you might have heard of A/B testing, hypothesis testing. This was not born in software. It started actually in agriculture. And it's in every single STEM field you will work in. Again, I will try and be as brief as I can, but just remember this one thing, this acronym PICKUP. You have a population. Who is your target audience? Is it those Gen Zs? Right? What's the intervention? What are you going to show them that's different than before? So maybe it's that new landing page. Or it's actually been in popular view through the COVID trials, right? So maybe you're giving them a new vaccine. But then you also have to have a control set within that population. So this is a population within the population who look exactly the same, but they won't see the change. So they won't see the new landing page, or maybe they'll get a placebo injection. Then you need to understand what you're going to observe over time. For the e-commerce example, it might be conversion rate, but for the COVID example, it could be transmission or immunity. And depending on which metric you look at, you need to assess your time period, because transmission rate could be quite near, whereas immunity, you might need to look at over a couple of years. And from someone who's had 2 injections and 2 times I've had COVID, that's really important. So the third thing I said was system thinking. And you really have to think of it in 2 ways. As a leader, you stop thinking just at the component or the feature level, and you start to look at the whole system at large and how your users and customers interact with it. So on one side, you have the actors. That's your users. They have a context. So let's give an example. Let's imagine you are searching for a property in London. And let's imagine the economy is a little bit better than it is today, and there are properties being listed every few minutes. So this user's walking around with their mobile phone, refreshing the application every 5 minutes to get the latest property so they can put down an offer first. However, if you look on your system, how is your system supporting that action? Now, if my system is only uploading houses every 3 hours or 3 days, I'm not really meeting the needs of someone who's refreshing that very often. And also, we know that the user is using the mobile app. So maybe we prioritize fixing the mobile app over the desktop app. So you can start to go down into your subsystems and understand where you need to change things. Batch upload endpoints versus real-time streaming of data is 2 very different technologies. You also need to think about the impact any change you make has on the rest of the teams and the systems. hopefully your architecture is flexible enough that you can make changes, but sometimes you still need to think about it. So whether your architecture is asynchronous or synchronous in communications. And for those of you who don't understand what that means, this is an analogy. Am I broadcasting messages out like your aunties on WhatsApp, or am I calling you all the time, right? That's the difference, right? So you might need to change things like the contract or make sure it's backwards compatible. So those are the 3 ways, right? A multi-potentialite is just someone who loves to try new things. They're going to feel uncertain a lot. They're going to go through that learning curve. They're going to use measurement and evidence to help themselves go through that journey, and they're going to think at a system level, not just at an individual component and feature level. When you start doing these things, all of a sudden, you become the problem-solving expert. All of a sudden, when there's a hard thing to solve, it comes your way. And there is a phenomenon called the Einstein effect, which means that when you become really specialized or you're in a particular place, you tend to use the same sort of tools over and over again to solve the same problem, even if there are better tools out there, because that's what you know. I was really lucky enough to experience this firsthand at the very start of my career. I'm going to become really niche right now, but just stay with me, I promise. Okay, so I said to you I worked for the Ministry of Defense, and it was actually the Atomic Weapons Establishment. So I was about 19, and I worked there for a year. I was investigating the reaction between hydrogen and depleted uranium. Now, I was never quite told the application of this project, but we can extrapolate out, atomic weapons. So most research in this area would look at the surface of the material. So really seeing how that reaction comes out on the surface. But so, I did that. That was the first thing I did there. And they did it through scanning electron microscopes. But I had read some papers that showed that sometimes this reaction takes place under the surface. And some of these papers showed it because they cut into the sample. Again, I was never told exactly what this is going to be used for, but you can imagine that you probably can't cut into this in real life. So I was just reading and reading. I couldn't find much. It was, again, very niche in academia. And so I just widened the search. I just started reading all kinds of papers. And I came up with an idea that I stole from the semiconductor industry, where they were using a technique to look at the different layers of conductivity between materials. Thought, we got one of those tools, let me try it. So I tried it, and it worked. And it was the first of its kind to detect below the surface. I then borrowed from another discipline where I did Monte Carlo simulation. So this is like data science techniques to interrogate my data. And again, we learned some new things. And so by the time I graduated the work alongside my team, we were able to publish some of the work. And then a couple of years after that, it continued to publish work. And so I was just there, just experimenting, trying things from different places, and we ended up discovering something new. Now, I will say I worked with some of the best scientists in the country. I learned from them, and I still remember what they taught me to this day. And I was actually a novice. But because I was a novice, I had no preconceived perceptions, and I tried something new that helped us discover something new. That is another trait of a multi-potentialite, being someone who can do idea synthesizing. So fast forward to now, I took a picture of Onfido's platform, and this is it doesn't even make sense once I started adding the colors. I was like, yeah, my team just interacts everywhere, right? From the dashboard, front end, to the infrastructure, to test, to technical program management. And actually, I probably wouldn't be good at my job if I was an expert in any one of those things. I have to have a broad range. And to do that, I pull from all of my different experiences. I used to be really derogatory about it, like, oh, I've done some random things. But actually, and now I realize how this all comes together, and I can use it in different spaces. I mentioned I volunteer with a school. They needed help building their IT and technology strategy, and even help contributing to the curriculum. Working with advising new startups, and they're exploring new technology like GraphQL. Again, I can take the learnings there back into Onfido. And that happened because I said yes to experiences. So when projects came my way, I was just like, yeah, I'll try it. So you can do that by getting hands-on experience. But you can also do it from learning. So you're all here today to learn from other people. and meet people, network, and ask questions in the future. But you can also learn from people you will never meet. So books, podcasts, newsletters. Who's to subscribe to the Color in Tech newsletter? I see a few hands. Color in Tech have put on this event, and you need to subscribe to that newsletter. It's one of the best newsletters in the technology space. So please do that before you go home. This slide is all you need to know about a multi-potentialite's brain. There was supposed to be 3 books on this slide, and I just kept adding and I kept adding. And that's because I like to read a range of different topics. And sometimes you pull ideas from different spaces. I found an idea to describe risk management for technology projects from an investing book. But if I had to pick one, I would choose, on the theme of this conference, I would choose Race After Technology by Ruha Benjamin. I loved it so much, I wrote a blog post on it, so you can find that on my Medium page. So it's all about getting range, either from hands-on experience or from learning from others. But I'm going to have an unpopular opinion here, but it is actual fact. Technology is not synonymous with coding. Right? I have people come into interviews with me and be like, oh, but I'm not technical. And I'm looking at the CV, especially women, looking at the CV and okay, you've worked in tech for 20 years. Do you mean you don't code? And they're like, oh, actually, I actually can code, I just don't code for a living. I'm like, okay, so you can code, you're not applying for a coding job, so why have you told me you're not technical? Would you like to start again? So it's really important that we change our language. Technology predated software. Software is just a mechanism that we are exploring and innovating right now. Ray Dalio talks about the fact that paper is one of the best technologies, and as a material scientist, I agree, because I can read a book that was written 1,000 years ago, but I cannot access anything I saved on a floppy disk 15 years ago. So, technology is many roles, and there are so many different roles in this space that are technical, that are product management, user experience, security, development is one of them, but it's not the only one. And even if you are an engineer, there is a difference between programming and software engineering. Software engineering, you're solving a problem. But I will say it's always good to learn skills that help you to communicate, and that could be communicating with other humans or communicating with machines. So it's always great skills to have, even if that doesn't become your profession. And sometimes it just needs to be to a good enough level, like my French and my Python. So I'm going to wrap up by talking about how you kind of work with experts, because I said that sometimes multi-potentialites, you've got that range, and sometimes you feel that imposter syndrome because you're not the specialist in one particular area. It's really about making data-driven decisions, right? You don't have to know everything about that, but you can make data-driven decisions. These are questions I get from a team on Slack, should we do this? Should we upgrade? Everything's going to fail. And it's about looking at the data and making that call and making that decision and helping them make that decision too. They're experts in what they do, but what they come to you for is to get unblocked. And you need to do that through the data. You're also going to learn from your team. It's a two-way street, right? So you need to set the vision, the strategy, the technology direction. I don't pretend to know it all, but I know enough to challenge, and I know enough to ask the questions that maybe other people aren't thinking about. I like to learn and read ahead as well, so I need to find out what is coming down the line. So I'm reading right now about surreal databases, which normally you have to make a trade-off between different functionality in databases. This is apparently it's the wonder product, and it's on the edge, and it does everything. So we might not use that today, but next year, that could be the thing that we need to look into. I learn new expertise from my team. I know what they're feeling. I have to think about the whole person and the whole team. And I get expert feedback on my ideas as well. So to close, we talked about being a multi-potentialite, constantly trying to be that scientist, learning and going through things so you can experiment and prove things through data. Really being able to system think and measure your progress. To take experiences, take on things, say yes to experiences, read, learn from others, so that you can become more and more expert in solving complex problems. But you also have to do that about yourself. You have to learn about yourself. Be a scientist of who you are, what you like, what you don't like. Just because I said yes to everything, I didn't love everything. I liked and I learned some things, right? So it's also important to you understand yourself. And for a long time, I didn't accept this about myself. So I used to struggle with a lot of the things you can see on this side of the slide, procrastinating because there's so many things, or feeling overwhelmed, or feeling like I just don't follow through things. But you can reframe this, right? I learned enough to get through that problem. And not every interest has to be a profession, right? You can just do things for the fun of it. I took a 12-week sewing class. I bought a sewing machine, and I've never used it again. Sometimes you could just do it for fun. So yeah, remember that you're not skillless. You have many interests and pursuits. So I want to just take some time to just remind everyone you don't have to fit into one box. You can be a specialist and you can be a generalist. And you can, even as a generalist, you can go deep. Like there are some times when nobody knows more about that topic than me because I just go into it. It's just that I like more than one thing. And you can too. So that's it. I'd love to just chat to some of you. Please come up to us. The Onfido stand is outside. I'll be here. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about you. And maybe let me know if you are a multi-potentialite. Does anyone think they are now? I can see a few hands. Yeah, gang, gang. So yeah, definitely come and see us. We're really excited to speak to you.
We got a couple minutes, but has anyone got any questions at all for Afia? Yeah, okay, cool. Let me come to you. Come to this gentleman first, and I'll...
Hi, a really amazing talk. In the journey to becoming a multi-potentialite, how did you deal with almost like learning where you needed to improve? So you talked a bit about kind of the self-reflection when dealing with stressful tasks. Like, what did you discover, and how did you almost implement that self-development to kind of embrace rather than kind of procrastinate or reject?
Yeah, it's a really good question. As I said, it is something that I did struggle with for a long time. I think one of the things is I always wanted to deliver. So, you know, I would arm myself almost. And I think sometimes imposter syndrome is negative, obviously. It has a negative context. But there is a positive of it, is that you want to, like, learn everything and you want to be the best. So I would often keep going to be able to solve that problem and learn the most about it. I think in other times, it's also about saying no to some things. That is okay too. So if I have like 5 things on the go, like I might have to just be like, okay, which of the 5 is the most important? Which one do I want to focus on? So a few years ago, I was trying to do my AWS cloud certification, and I was also going to French lesson, and I was also like, okay, French just has to chill for a bit. Duolingo kept shouting at me, but I had to make that trade-off so I could complete that and then move on to the next thing. So you still do that as someone as a multi-potentialite as well.
Hi, thank you so much for that talk. It's great to have a word for it beyond generalist. How have you found trying to sell yourself to roles when you're exploring a new interest and hiring managers are looking for a specific type of role? How do you navigate that? Yeah,
it's tough to navigate. I'm not gonna lie. We have to change the narrative and explain this and have the words for it, which is why I'm so passionate about talking about this. You know, I'm now at the stage of my career where I can have the conversations like, you know, if you're looking for this person who done exactly that in the competitor, I'm not her. Like, you need to go back to that competitor, because I've never worked in the same industry more than once. I'm always kind of hopping around. So you can actually be very upfront and honest, because what you don't want also is to waste your time, like going through this. But you might find people who understand. So like when I was in global manufacturing, I was putting software into those systems and moving things through production. E-commerce fulfillment is very similar. And so the leader I was working for was an engineer. He was at Apple, he was at Amazon. Like he got it. So you find the people who get it, network with them, because they are looking for people that they can just give problems to solve, and they need them. So like when they spot you, they will find you and they will hunt you out, and they'll be like, you need, like I've literally had people say, like, you need to work for me, because they need you to solve their problems.
Guys, that's all the time we have. Can we get a massive round of applause, please, for Afia?
Thank you, everyone.